Hello, everybody, and welcome into the SorareData Strategy Show. I'm your host today, Sean PSU Fans 2 Newsom. As you guys see, I decided that it was a good opportunity to send Andrew Laird to the band house because why wouldn't I do that? Unfortunately, he had to get suspended a little bit. Sometimes when you're a little bit over the age, you need to relax. So I felt it was good to give him like that week off to recharge his batteries. And I told him I'm like it would be a good time to talk about U23. I felt because European season is ending, so I asked for someone that would be good with Europe or U23 cards in general. And some reason I got a guy that tweets about 36-year-old Asian goaltenders. So welcome in Harry Trades joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this doesn't feel right. Led's second in under 23 pro this week, and I'm winning thresholds with 36-year-old J-League goalkeepers. Things have changed, Sean. Things have changed.
Things have changed all around. This is Harry and mine's first show together, so pretty exciting. First off, thanks to everyone for tuning in. I know Laird's not here, so it's exciting for everyone, I'm sure. We have a bunch of people coming in. The good place asked what Laird did to get suspended. Again, old age, just needed that time off. Jonathan would like to make sure that we talk about Oscar Gluck when we get going on the U23 cards. But yeah, as Harry discussed earlier today, the Kaylee situation got scored for the FC Seoul game. And for some reason, Andrew Laird is on the podium. So I'm glad he's not here so that he can't be the one to brag about it. But it was pretty funny after we talked about the competing versus competing situation last week. Laird is on the podium in U23 Rare Pro division. He doesn't even play. So, Harry, what's your thoughts on that? Since I was told that you had a super, super great piece of advice for him with that lineup.
Yeah, it's weird. The last couple of weeks, Laird has been, myself, Sam's, and Laird's little looking up with Laird chat on Discord. He'll send in his his lineups or potential lineups for the weekend or whatever. And yeah, last couple of weeks he's been splashing into the under 23 sort of areas, and not something that Laird normally does competitively. He just kind of throws them in there for so coins or whatever. But the last couple of weeks, I think last week he had a nice finish, or last weekend, sorry. And then this week he sent me this lineup prior to Game Lock on Friday, and he had Florentine as captain. And I was like, and my exact words were, I would be tempted to captain Dwight McNeil. Everton at home to, Bournemouth need the win, whatever. They got the win, but that we didn't know that at the time. And yeah, Florentine hasn't really put up one of these games in a long time, as far as I'm aware. So I was a bit skeptical, even though it was a great matchup. Away from home, albeit, he went with, obviously, the McNeil. He went with my advice, but luckily it's not going to cost him first place. So I can die happy knowing that I haven't cost Laird his first under 23 place.
To be fair, would have been scenes had you done that.
It would have happened.
But yeah, looking at things, it was pretty interesting because yesterday all day it was pretty clear based on conversations I had and looking at Twitter that Korean Timber, and those who are unfamiliar, that is Lee Han Bum, the Korean version of Jurian Timber, which actually, to be fair, he's even a better representation of him. And I'm even wearing a Timber kit today in honor of that. But it was pretty clear he had a pretty big game. So I was sitting here yesterday, and Laird was out on the weekends because he likes to leave the house. Again, I don't know why he does that, but he was out and about, and he was like, yeah, I don't even look at anything. I don't know how they did. I'm like, I don't know, because Seoul had a clean sheet, and Bake is at least getting 70, probably over that. And it seemed like Korean Timber had a huge game based on what people were saying. So I was sitting here laughing. I was like, this is just fantastic, because not only are you like needing those points to like move up, but I'm pretty sure you have a chance to get a podium, if it actually happens. And he was like, I don't think I have a chance at podium. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you have a chance at a podium if Big Lubes gets a decisive. I think Lubes had a decisive like immediately in the game.
Yeah.
And then it was just hilarious because I was like, well, good luck getting that Korean game scored, Laird, because who knows? But yeah, it was, to be honest, I would have captained McNeil too. And like you said, it didn't matter. But he needed, literally, as you guys see here, he needed 88-ish points to get to second, and he got 88 points. So
wow.
It was good to see Laird moving that way. So yeah, today I want to talk about the European U23s and just in general U23. So I think the way Harry and I sort of talked about going through this is we're going to talk about guys that are aging out, what our thoughts are from them aging out possibly. We're going to talk about guys that are great options that are still staying in. And then we're also going to talk about like summer related options if they become relevant as well. So we're going to start off here with everybody's absolute favorite position, goaltender. Goaltender. So if we're looking at U23 goaltenders going into next season, we are going to have a lot of age outs precisely at the top. One that you are very fond with Muric. I know you had a lot of success playing Muric this year.
Yeah, that was a massive part of most of my success early on in this season. Was sort of him with that Bayer Super Rare sort of situation around the World Cup. After the World Cup, it made me it helped me with my Vinny. I won Harwood Bellis with those two, and then the next week put Bellis in and won the Vinny. It was kind of like a crazy little 2-week period. But yeah, Muric was insane this sort of season. Burnley were insane. Obviously, they dominated the championship, and that kind of flows in nicely into how valuable having an under 23 championship goalkeeper, if that makes sense, whilst there's Champions League, Conference League, Europa League playing, because those matchups are genuinely quite tough for under 23s, like Costa, for example, even though he had some really good games this last season, I guess, in the Champions League and stuff, a couple of penalty saves and whatever, but genuinely it's a tough sort of league. So if you've got a smasher goalkeeper in the championship playing on the same midweeks as all those sort of tougher matchups for the under 23s elsewhere, it's a massive advantage, right? If you're pairing that with a crazy good defender in Bayer, then it's just kind of, you just hit the jackpot in that sense. And I fell into that. I didn't buy Bayer because he was going to Burnley. I had him anyway, and it was just so be it. He moved to Burnley. But Muric, being 24 now, things change. They've just got, promoted to the Premier League, and his situation has changed. He is 24. He is not under 23 after this sort of summer. And I guess there is a gap to fill there with his sort of miss. Did you buy a Muric at all?
I did not. Actually won his super rare at one point and just sold it immediately but I think I won it last summer before it was known he was going to Burnley. But okay. I was basically, if you remember the year before when he was in Turkey, he just saw like 8,000 shots a game and was somehow like getting just an absurd AA game and not conceding. And I looked at it, I'm just like, this just isn't a realistic situation where like I can expect a goalie to face like 15 shots on goal a game and not concede 3 goals all the time. So I was like, I can't go into him. And then like if you go to another team, like that's just not a realistic outcome. Like you're just not going to see that shot volume again. But he ended up going to Burnley and was very good because Burnley were very dominant. He did have some random DNP situations that popped out throughout the year, but overall, I mean, great year. Like you were someone that really was able to reap the benefits of him, like you just talked about. But some other guys that we get that are aging out here, I believe Hussein is aging out, so he'll be gone next year. Donnarumma, we've talked about Donnarumma plenty. He is very frustrating to own because he has major upside due to how bad the defense is, but they just concede so frequently. And at one point was one of the most expensive goalies out there. We have a few others, but like usually goalie isn't as bad as some other positions like Bayazit's aging out. There are some other guys like Alvin Lafont is aging out. Safanov is aging out. So there's definitely some guys that are aging out. Gaetan Kook, I have a couple of him. As you see, like the pricing of the guys that are aging out, like Kook 0.24, Safanov 0.28 for rare. Some of these guys like Lafont's still a little bit higher, which I think is because people just know he's not going to be there next year, not. So that's something to look at. But in terms of, let's talk about just summer versions of the U23 situation first. So we'll start in America. And the big guy that you guys see here, and I think is very clearly the top goalie in the MLS, is Georgi Petrovic. That said, a lot of his scoring is because their defense isn't great, and he just is a really good shot stopper, and he's also saved a boatload of penalties. So he's someone that is a good keeper, don't get me wrong, but I have concerns that he leaves in the summer. and his price point is just so much more expensive than other guys that fit this bill. So like if I look at Petrovic compared to these other guys, now this is just set with like they have played 7 of the last 15. So I'm only getting guys in that are like mostly locked in to some extent. But you look here in America, it is not very plentiful here. So what's your thoughts on the American situation for the summer?
It's a weird one, isn't it? We've been waiting a while for those Petrovic cards, and yeah, like you said, they are pretty expensive right now. 1 year left, like you said, and there is that sort of, well, there was that looming sort of transfer, I guess, sort of at the start of last season, but it didn't happen. But we didn't have cards at the time. Now we do. Who knows what happens this summer? And then, yeah, I mean, Salentano's a standout in terms of how he's performing, but then you're having to spend. I'm looking at that. I can't believe he's basically an ETH, which is like not that crazy to think about if you were talking about like maybe a year ago in terms of most under 23 keepers with that price. But he stands out there in terms of 1, scoring, 2, and price. And I guess he's got 2 more years left, which is a big plus. Highly rated goalkeeper. Durso obviously ages out, but he's had a few decent performances recently. Jota, however we're going to pronounce that, he wasn't supposed to be the starter, right? Was that Room's position?
Yeah, Eloy Room, and he's back in training. Whether or not he regains the role from Schulte is a question.
Okay. And then Marks was starting, wasn't he, for a bit? And then, whoever the Charlotte keeper is now, Cava something. I'm not going to be able to pronounce it. Whoever he is. So he's sort of out of the reckoning for now. And then then we've got Chris Brady, who's the youngest on the list, but probably playing for the worst team, I guess, defensively. I'm an owner of him. I bought him a couple of months ago. I mean, at the time, it was out, like Petrovic wasn't on the platform when I bought my Brady, or traded for him 2 or 3 months ago. So it was, I mean, Celentano looking back would probably have been the best shout, but no one really, I didn't really foresee Cincinnati being like this dominant, if I'm being completely honest. I thought they'd be okay, but I didn't think they'd be like this good or have this good of a start. So he was, I just didn't really think of him. And then this Sirios fella, he wasn't supposed to be starting either, right? As far as I'm aware.
Correct.
So that came out of nowhere.
If you look at this list, right, and I'll expand it here in a minute, but like we look at this list, Petrovic didn't have a card. Like if you look at Petrovic, he has on the market
7, I think.
It's like 6 or 7, and he just came out in the last like week, I guess his first card was a month ago, and that was the first card of Petrovic, so he wasn't really an option. Moises Ramirez, I don't think there's any cards of him, or if there are, there's very few. Yeah, there's no cards of Moises Ramirez, so he doesn't count. Then you have Sorare, wasn't expected to be the starter. Celentano was, and he's been pretty solid, so he looks like someone who you definitely could have targeted. Then you move down, Durso again, ages out.
Yeah.
Then you have Schulte, wasn't supposed to be the starter, supposed to be Eloy Room. Even now, it's questionable. George Marks was definitely, he was like the 3rd stringer to start the year, and then all of a sudden was in. And Joe Ducey just mentioned as well that Sirois is still likely to lose his place when Pantomis gets back. So like that's an issue with Sirois. And then Marks again wasn't going to be the guy as well. And Mark Lele came in and he talked about Chris Brady. To me, Brady was the best option here. I won one, but I was planning to buy one regardless, so it kind of worked out well for me in that position. And the reason is I think he probably goes similarly down his ex-teammate Gaga Slanina's path of MLS goalie into a European sort of situation. Hopefully he won't end up sitting for a year like Slanina sort of did. But I think what the idea is for a lot of the European teams with like a guy like that is let them finish out the year in the MLS, whatever. Bring them in January or whenever that part of the window comes out where they can come over. Have them be there for 6 months, get accustomed to training with that team, get used to things, and then loan them out. So like my interpretation on next year for Slonina is I expect Slonina to get a starting spot somewhere in hopefully the championship is kind of what I'm envisioning for Slonina. So that is kind of where the thought process is. But if I go and expand it a little bit, so like let's say you have to have 2 starts, you're going to see some more people come in. Romero doesn't really play enough to play much, but here is another one that is interesting. So Jonathan talked about John Pulskamp losing his backup / starter role to like Malia and then McIntosh. So what's your thoughts on the situation with Pulskamp and the fact that he was like the starter, then was like the backup, then all of a sudden McIntosh is ahead of him?
Yeah, I mean, it was a situation, like you said, prior to the Petrovic situation. Like there was two goalies I could have bought. It was Brady or Celentano, realistically, right? And then at the time, Polskan was kind of in that question because everyone sort of foresaw that he would probably be the starter prior to the season starting. Obviously, was the case, wasn't the case. He's been in and out, like you said. Now he's like third choice somehow. But I've watched him play. I think he's a good goalkeeper, if I'm being honest. I haven't watched enough of him to I've watched more Brady than I have, a Polskamp. He's a little bit older, obviously. I don't know. It's an interesting situation that obviously I wouldn't want to get stuck into. I try and keep it as safe as possible with my goalkeepers. That's like the only position that I'm like, just don't take any risks with that, or minimal risk. There's always risks with under 23 keepers inherently. But I do think like when I went and got Brady in my head, and kind of from what I spoke with other people about, he was like as safe as it kind of got. Celentano as well, don't get me wrong, but he was a bit more expensive. But for the price point at the time, prior to the season starting, I was like in my head, there's no way Brady just doesn't start this season. If he makes a load of mistakes, then so be it. But I can't control that. All I can control is who's going to start that first game, right? Yeah. But that Pulskamp one, I don't know if did he start like the first few games? Or was it like a couple in?
I think Malia was on the bench, but he did start at the beginning of the season. The first like 5 games, it was Pulskamp's job, and then they moved to. He wasn't even bad. He had 2 clean sheets in those 5 games, but the game in which he got benched after, he got lit up for 4 goals. But then like the 4 games immediately after, they lost all 4 games. So like
it's not the goalkeeper's fault, basically. Yeah, exactly. Is probably getting that. You're only as good as your defense at the end of the day as a goalkeeper. Like, yeah, there is sort of, there is mistakes that goalkeepers can make and have made. Brady's made a couple this season where like, not an easy catch, but an easy-ish catch, and they just kind of go through the hands. And I saw Selena do it last year, but these are young goalkeepers. They're gonna make mistakes, and I know most 19-year-old goalkeepers aren't playing first-team football in the MLS. Regardless of where they're from. So there's mistakes to be made at 19 years old. Not everyone's Donnarumma playing for AC Milan at 17. Nobody is actually. Like there's not really been a goalkeeper since that have like started that young, realistically, in like a European team sort of thing. But regardless, it's a tough position to sort of come into as a youngster. And like if you watch like Brady's interviews and stuff, like he comes across so mature and stuff. You'd never think that kid's like 19. Like he looks like he's had a tough paper round.
It's funny that you use Donnarumma as the example, the king of like heirs. Dude has like 6.
Well, now he is. Now he is. Yeah.
True. 100%. And Joe brings it up, and Joe talks about the situation a little bit more. And he said the Pulskamp started, Malia was injured, but it was at the time like it was who's going to start between these two. It was like a coin flip going into the season, which he mentions. And then now they have gone to McIntosh, which is a weird situation to say the least. So yeah, like you just mentioned, at the start of the season, there was 2 American MLS goalies that you were comfortable with for like a longer stretch. Durso was always also like it was evident that he was going to start as the season went on. Yeah. So if we move over to Asia, situation was even worse. Where going into the season, there was one clear-cut starter, and that was Keisuke Osako, who was, in my opinion, pretty clear, far and away the best summer U23 goalie. Because as we've talked about with U23, especially the goalies, you care about how long they're going to last and how long they're going to play for as a U23 goalie. So with Osako, you look and you're like, I get an extra year past this year. Sign me up on that because that's pretty important. And Osako goes into 2024. But as you see here, if I limit it to at least 6 games of the last 15 played, you have a bunch of situations that were unsure to start the season. You had Kim Jong-hun for Jeonbuk, and it was uncertain whether or not he would start the season. And even so, he didn't start the season. He came in after 3 games, I believe, and started. Oh, he started the first game and had an error, then was benched for 3, then came back in. So again, it was up in the air. Then you have Hayakawa, who wasn't the starter. It was Kim Sun-tae before this, and then obviously he started right at the end of last year due to injury and has just continued in the role this year. So that wasn't sort of locked in. Then you have our boy Bake, who for FC Seoul, again, it was a question whether or not he would start the season, and he did not. They started the season elsewhere, and then he came in. But again, he had an error led to a goal at one point, then got benched for a game, and then came back in. And then Kosei Tane, who we've obviously discussed quite a few times on our show, and I'm sure you've discussed as well, but he's all over the board. So yeah, if you look at Asian American, you can like count everything. Like your guys that you were okay with that started the season that had longer than like 3 months of utility left were Osako, Brady, and Celentano. It was literally like that. And then there were spots where you could subjectively buy someone like Kim Jong-hoon. We thought there might be a situation where he starts. So like I actually bought his card in October for 0.205, which like now looking back at 0.205 is a lot, but back then 0.205 was just like you're throwing a dart at the guy, and obviously he started. And then so the situation with U23 goalies is a little bit of a mess, especially in America. But all right, if we open this up to all regions now, we are going to talk a little bit about guys going into the next years. And we're going to look and we're going to talk about a lot of uncertainty around these guys, especially the top. So for me, if you weren't moving him, if you weren't moving any of these guys and they were staying at their team they're currently on, would Verbruggen be your favorite U23 goalie option, period? Or would it be someone else?
It's a tough one because he's probably the most talented / going to be the best, if that makes sense. But I don't know if the Anderlecht situation in terms of them as a team is what like I want to get into. I'm a Verbruggen holder, don't get me wrong. I think he's going to move, and that that looks like wherever it's going to look like. But yeah, if he was to stay at Anderlecht next season, it's a good spot. But I do foresee him. I mean, I know some of his stats were incredible this season, but like, let's say they lose. Who's your boy, the defender, the centre back, the young one? If the Bast ends up leaving, Vertonghen's like, I don't know if Vertonghen's staying for another season or not, but let's just say he's not for now, just argument's sake. If you lose both your centre halves, does those Verbruggen sort of like, because he had some crazy peak scores last season, like your 80s. He was getting into those dark greens quite comfortably. I do worry that like he might not be as good. He'll still be as good of a goalie, but I just don't know if his scores will reflect that, right? Then we get into maybe like a Costa. Obviously, okay, only a year left. I know it looks very likely he stays, but let's just say, for argument's sake, he doesn't. That probably has to be the safest on paper, I think, in terms of like, number one for Portugal. Porto are extremely dominant in their league where Anderlecht aren't. I know that necessarily doesn't translate into goalkeeper scores all the time because Costa's, like we've seen, his AA isn't as good. We can see here last 5. Well, look at last 14, 9.9. Verbruggen's 14.3. It's okay, 9.9, but it's not going to maybe win you those like huge prizes that you'll want. But he probably gets more clean sheets on average, I'd like to think, throughout the season. But he probably moves, right? Doof's an interesting one as well. Like he's come up, like I see him a lot, discussed a lot on Twitter in terms of like, it might be Tottenham's next keeper. Like he's sort of discussed about getting that, that move after a really sort of great breakout season. I don't know. Who would you prefer if you had to pick now, Costa or Verbruggen? I know there's an age difference, but like if you had to just be given a card right now to use for the whole of next season, who are you picking there?
So if I knew they were staying, I think I am taking Costa. But
yeah, I think that's the safest option.
But I think so. Here, let me reiterate this too. Let me change this. I think I would take Costa. I think you should probably take Verbruggen. And the reason is because for me, having an elite U23 goalie for, in hypothetical terms, for like one season is pretty important because I'll have very high-end players there and I can like go and replace him easier than maybe someone with a smaller gallery. But Charlie mentions, like, obviously we're just talking in the event that these guys stayed. So this is not necessarily real, but this is why, like, before last season, I said that the number one guy, and he honestly might still be there, is Van de Voort. Van de Voort is going to play another season at Genk unless Leipzig pay for him to come in early. And if Leipzig paid for him to come in early, he's going to start. Like, I can't imagine they're like, yo, we need to pay you extra money to get him in today. And then they're like, all right, yeah, you're just going to be the backup to someone. If they do that, they're going to play him. But as you guys see here, we have a couple other mentions, and Charlie does say, so there's a good shot that Verbruggen goes and rides the pine in the Premier League. which is definitely possible. Like, I think Verbruggen has a lot more bad situations than some of these other guys. Kevin just brought up a good shout to me, and that's Theo Sander is a good one with Mantle finishing his loan if they avoid relegation. I actually think that Sander's a pretty good goalie regardless, and I think like long term as a project, he's a pretty reasonable play. But if you're looking for someone that's like a guaranteed guy, not sure I'd go there. I might go Van de Voort because like of these guys, like these main high end guys that we're sort of talking, because like Mantle's loan ends. Magic, I don't know if what he's doing is totally sustainable. Diouf, like you said, he could move. We don't really know what he's going to do. Kavlina, is Kavlina still on loan from Zagreb?
I believe so. Yeah, I saw somebody post something on Twitter to say that. Yeah, he was part of like a potential Zagreb team of next year. So yeah, let me.
So like, is Kavlina going to go back and start for them, or is Kavlina going to not go back and start for them, or is he going to go elsewhere? It's a difficult situation.
Oh no, actually, sorry to interrupt you. No, apparently he's not. He plays for Lokomotiva Zagreb. Like it says contract until 2024.
So yeah, then in that situation, I mean, Kavlina makes sense. But if he's only under contract for one more season, they're either going to likely sell him or re-up him. And if they re-up him, that's a really good situation because he likely is going to get you at least that year, and you can feel comfortable about that. So for me, the two guys that are the most appealing for me right now are like Van de Voort and Chevalier. I think Chevalier for Lille is really favorable. I think he's a pretty talented goalie as well, and I don't really see him moving. But some people talked about, there were some questions about if we're going to talk about backups on the show today. DD Sorare asked, will we be going over backups and understand the rumor? I don't know if we're going to be going over backups as much about, we will talk here about some guys that are maybe a little bit less heralded, even though, I mean, there's definitely been some hype around the guy that we'll talk about next from us and other people. But that is Bazunu for Southampton. We talked about the beginning of the goaltender chat with Muric, having a goalie that pops off in the championship in midweeks, big time importance because they get games when you have Champions League games, when maybe like if you looked at the Champions League after the group stage of the Champions League, I think there were 3 U23 goalies that were like locked in that moved on, and that was like
Verbruggen was one of them.
You had Costa move on, and you had Verbruggen move on
in the conference, of course. Yeah, who else was it?
There was maybe one other that was like I can't remember.
Trubin. Did Trubin move on a little bit? Maybe
they got through one game. Maybe you got one knockout. But like, I mean, Trubin is a guy that I wouldn't have really wanted anyways. I mean, I do because I think he's talented, but I also don't. Sorare Raul, hello to you as well for joining us today. But we're going to talk about Bazunu now, and he's someone that you and I are both incredibly interested in going into next year. He was the starting goalie for Southampton for a good portion of this season, and then they sort of benched him at the end of the season due to stupidity and other nonsense because they wanted to avoid relegation, so they wanted a veteran goalie, as you see. But Bazunu is 21, already gets starts for his country in the Netherlands, which I'm not saying that's like a huge benefit. Like, it's not like, oh my God, I totally want Bazunu because he's going to play for Ireland. You're not saying that. But he does have international eligibility, which is something. And if you look at him, so you see actually Professor Teckers was the last buy. I was the second to last buy. And didn't you win him recently?
I traded mine for Donnarumma and another card, basically. So I won Donnarumma, immediately traded for Bazunu, hoping he would play that midweek. And that was the first game he got back.
Of course. But luckily, with you buying that, you still have longer-term possibilities.
For sure.
So, like with Bazunu, if you look at him, right, he doesn't have tons of cards. He only has 41 rares. He has 3 super rares as well. And I think that is pretty favorable.
Yeah.
I think that there is the possibility to, someone mentioned earlier in the chat, and I'm sorry I didn't mention earlier because I knew we were going to discuss it here, but like you have like U23 pieces with Livermoto and different guys there that could be options to pair with Bazunu. But 46 championship games is a pretty fantastic situation as well. So is there any other goalies you want to talk about outside of Bazunu that maybe will be starters next year, or that you're excited to look at going into next season?
I mean, off the top of my head and looking at the chat as well, I mean, this comes from a more of a biased perspective because I do think he'll end up getting a spot eventually, and that is that Tobelason. Like we mentioned, does Van der Vaart move this summer if Leipzig pay the extra or whatever? Potentially, but maybe not. If he does, then does that mean that the Tobelason sort of comes in and comes through that sort of Genk, conveyor belt of young goalkeepers who, he's been on the bench all season. He's made a couple of sort of appearances when Van der Vaart hasn't been there. That's something to definitely look into. This Germ has made up a great point as well. Sturm Graz is goalkeeper right now. They have a guy on loan from Arsenal. I know that's very non-Tobelason related, but I just wanted to make that a point as well. He could end up in a favourable spot. I don't know how long this the Graz loan is. It could be 2024, and that could be
look
interesting.
Up where you're going.
But yeah, Arthur Okumo, I think it doesn't say actually. But regardless, he's been starting this season. That's something that I'd be interested in. He's only 21, so I just can't really see him not finding a starting position, whether that's in Austria next season, whether that's in England, maybe in the Championship. You just never know, especially being on loan from Arsenal.
Okonkwo's loan does end this year, but he's only under contract at Arsenal till 2024. So it's a good shot they sell him this summer.
Potentially, or they might extend him for another year or something, and then loan. You know what I'm saying, and then do that extra loan. Who knows? Haber says, have we mentioned Doof? Yeah, we have mentioned Doof, to be fair. But yeah, like the Bazunu one, seems like the most logical situation for me in terms of like who can be that Muric replacement, right? Southampton just been relegated. He's like 21. He's got like 4 or 5 years of eligibility, or 3 or 4 years of eligibility under 23 wise. Yeah, he was probably he was out of his depth in the Premier League, if we're being completely honest. Not many 21-year-olds start in the Premier League for their team. Meslier was one of them. To be fair, Meslier has been a decent goalkeeper in the last couple of years for Leeds, I think, coming in so early in his career. But other than that, I can't really remember the last goalkeeper to really do that. But regardless, Bazunu's coming down. He probably stays. I just can't see why they would let him go. It just doesn't really make too much sense. And that 46 games in the champ could become valuable, or very valuable. DD says, you think Okuno or Hain? Yeah, so Arsenal have that Hain. He's from like Iceland or something. He's like the starting goalkeeper for his national team. They're saying that one of them will go, one of them will stay, type of thing. Mark mentions Mamadashvili as well. He's been sort of talked and touted to maybe or definitely get some sort of move away from Valencia. How are Valencia looking in the table right now, Sean? Do you know if I know they drew yesterday. Are they safe?
I think they're staying up. I think they won last game, and that was
okay. Yeah. Well, okay. So they're 2 points off the drop.
Plus,
with 1 game to go.
He does have international utility.
He does. A lot of these keepers we've mentioned, weirdly, like they do. Like that's something that maybe when I first started Sorare, when I first tried to get into under 23s, it was basically Donnarumma. Like he was the only sort of goalkeeper that was starting for their national team. We've just mentioned like Bazunu's like in and out, him and Kelleher, I guess. Donnarumma obviously, but aging out. Costa, there was another one I was going to mention. Muric, I guess, aging out as well. So a couple of them are aging out, a couple of them are sort of staying. But that is a big plus as well. Like in those, I know Jonathan loves mentioning it. Like he's the sort of Nations League king really with his Israel stack. But if you can get a goalkeeper that ticks all 3 boxes, like Costa right now ticks all 3 boxes. Plays in the midweek Champions League, starts for Portugal, and then starts in the league. Like, if you've got the triple threat, you're laughing. You don't need the triple threat because a lot of galleries can't maybe take that, if that makes sense. You might not have the players to play in international weeks. Not many do. And, the prizes, they aren't great, but it's nice to just be competing regardless. And then Mamadashvili's probably the other one, I guess, who's starting for, can't even think.
Yeah, and just to clarify this Valencia situation a little bit.
Yeah.
There is only 1 spot at risk still for relegation, and there's like 6 teams in the position, and Valencia has the tiebreaker on like 4 of them. So the only way Valencia goes down is if they lose and like 3 teams below them all win, which you're asking for a lot with 3 teams that are like right on the relegation line to all win. But yeah, we'll get moving after this to go a little bit. But a couple people mentioned some guys that we'll talk about here really quickly. Kevin mentioned Stenny Lamens too for when Mignolet finishes at Bruges. definitely a shot that he gets a crack when that happens. So also, though, like you're one injury away from like a guy like that starting, so it's never really a bad thing to have a guy like that. And we talked about a bit earlier when we were talking about Chris Brady, but for me, Slonina is a good pickup right now. I think he's probably a little bit more expensive, but like this is a guy that's pretty talented. And I think it's really, really, really likely he is going to get a loan into the championship this year. Now that said, he's pretty expensive right now, so like maybe you don't want to go down that risk. But anyways, moving on to defenders, we'll try to speed up a little bit because otherwise we'll be here. We could talk about this stuff all day. Lots of key guys that are aging out here. You guys are aware of Trent Alexander-Arnold just smashing lately. He ages out. Bayer does not, but again, Burnley goes to the Prem. Not someone I really want. You have other guys like outside Trent Alexander-Arnold, Harwood Bellis, I believe, ages out. He moves on, but you see, there's still quite a few guys here that are pretty favorable. I'm not going to talk on everyone. Like you guys are all familiar with Schlotterbeck. Like I don't need to sit here and talk about Schlotterbeck. You guys all know like Sutalo. I don't need to sit there and talk to you guys about Sutalo. And he's going to have a move too. So like the biggest thing with a lot of these guys is there's loans possibilities. But one name that I want to discuss, De Kuiper. I think De Kuiper has a shot to go back to Bruges. He's on loan from Westerlo from Bruges. I think he's had a great year and shown some major upside in his game this year as well. And I think he could go back to Bruges and be a really, really strong option going into next season. I would really like Antonio Silva if he stuck around going to next season. I think De Ligt, like that's someone that's sort of under the radar. People don't really credit the fact that De Ligt still gets another year of U23 eligibility. And he seemed like sort of the linchpin for Bayern in defense at the end of the season. I'm not saying he should have per se, but the last like 25 games, he started 24 of them for Bayern. Or actually, I'm sorry, he literally has started, the last time he did not start a game for Bayern was in the middle of February. Every other game he has started for Bayern in a long time since the World Cup. Like he started every game except for one since the World Cup for them. Granted, they're going to have a new manager, so like stuff like that's going to be a bit tricky. But we have other guys aging out. Bastoni ages out. He was someone that was pretty strong at times. Alphonso Davies has been injured quite a bit. Another guy that's interesting to me, what's your thoughts on Sakai? Because I saw that he likely is extending his loan at Cercle Bruges for another year.
He's been scoring really well, hasn't he? Playing that sort of like right wing back role. I haven't got to see him play enough as I'd like to. Similarly to Decipher as well. They both look really, really good. And I don't know, maybe this, like at one point nobody would touch a wing back, would they? On Sorare, like you would, unless it was Trent for a long time, you just wouldn't touch anyone. You just go with centre backs because they were a lot safer. But now, I guess that sort of that variance in score, that ability to maybe get those assists, from those sort of wing back roles is, more, it has more upside maybe than going with that quote unquote safer centre back play. But it all depends on matchups or whatever. Guardiola's another one we could speak about all day, I guess, in terms of where is he gonna sort of move if he moves. Araujo, just thinking about players who are aging out. Araujo and Koundé, they both age out of Barcelona, and they've had a decent season, I guess. Dalot's another big, not big, but big enough one aging out. Bukema, one of your boys.
Yep.
Timber, where's he going to end up? I think it's basically guaranteed Timber moves for me.
Yeah, I can't see him
from what he said. Yeah, but where does he, like, is he as effective? I know he hasn't been the Timber of old, but he's had spells recently where you're like, okay, he's definitely a playable option. Theate's got one more year, I believe, and he's been scoring in like pretty well. Ignacio,
honestly, the Ren team has been really good over the last
real good. And somebody mentioned, I think it's Aldemar. There's a under 23 goalkeeper that on the bench. Next season, you could end up having a full Ren stack. Doku, Guri. I don't know if they've got a mid technically, but you could go Theater and obviously Aldemar. I don't know. There's still some good defenders around, if that makes sense. There's some, Quest and McKenzie both aging out. It's an interesting one for the Genk boys. Pavlovic is still alive. Like I said, Ignacio. William Pacho, I think he's already moved to Frankfurt, I believe, from Antwerp, or like going to. But a couple guys like, I mean, one of the most exciting ones for me is Ruben Colwill. Levi Colwill. Sorry, Ruben Colwill plays for Cardiff City. Levi Colwill obviously on loan from Chelsea at Brighton right now, and has been injured for the majority of the season. But the last couple of games, Sean, I mean, this guy's he keeps getting assists from centre back. His left foot and the way he can just manipulate passes down that sort of left flank is like ungodly. Like everyone's he's like the talk of the town right now in terms of ball playing centre backs, I think. And is he going to have a major role under Pochettino next season? I think that could be really interesting. I know you've got Barry Ashio. I know he's injured, whatever. There's definitely a lot of competition, I guess. But Colwell going back could be like a really tasty one. Your boy Meulenstein, still under 23 for another season. Obviously, we've seen him play centre mid recently and has completely smashed it. Konate's aging out, just Tapsoba's aging out. That's an interesting one. I know he hasn't scored as well as he used to, I guess, but he was a beast for a long time. Like Mikey Baston says, he won a Colwell rare. But yeah, I mean, there's like Reece James. Okay, fair enough. We could maybe see, not the next Trent, but like a Trent type of scorer for the next season in James. Although there's a lot of injuries to really take on board there. Am I really excited for the? I don't know. I think losing Trent's a big deal in a sense. Like if you're not a Trent owner, it's big for me. I think it's big for you in that sense. Like and big for people who don't have him. In terms of competing next season, he's been immense over the last couple of months. But I don't know. What do you think happens to your boy Guardiola?
Yeah, I mean, Gavardio, so here's the thing. I just don't know where he's going to go. I think wherever he goes, if he plays, it's going to – wherever he goes is a step up, assuming he goes elsewhere. But, like, it's going to be a step up. It's going to likely be a strong spot. I just don't know exactly what the move's going to be right now, but I think it's going to be okay. Actually, one I want to talk about a bit was Didi Sorare just mentioned Inacio if he goes to Liverpool. I don't think he'd start at Liverpool. I know Chani just said that he thinks VVD and Konate would start at Liverpool. Regardless, but Inacio is someone that could go a lot of different places. I think like Inacio, Antonio Silva, and Timber are all three guys that have quite a bit of U23 eligibility left still and are likely to move, but we just don't know exactly where they're going to move yet, which makes it really tricky. So in terms of U23, like what I would want to do is I want to see who ends up at some of those big end challenger teams, like who ends up at Ajax, who ends up at Sporting Lisbon to replace Inacio, who ends up at Benfica to replace Antonio Silva. Granted, I don't think it's going to be another U23 center back probably, but a name that's pretty interesting that's going to Benfica, Milos Kerkez, who's coming over from AZ Alkmaar. I think he's a pretty favorable option going into next season. Like if he takes over, he's a totally different player than what Grimaldo is, but with how dominant that team is in league, like that could be a guy that could come in and step up a lot. But for me, it's really just about like who is going to be the starters. So Jace also just mentioned that Otamendi is linked away from Benfica. There's lots of links about him going back to Argentina and going back to River Plate. So we'll have to see what comes out. But yeah, for me, it's definitely like you got to look at. So it's Haber just said someone said to him that Rafa Guerrero could go to Benfica. That would actually make a lot of sense. That's a really good fit to replace what Grimaldo currently does. Like that's a really good fit. I don't know if that's what's going to happen, but if it did, it would make some sense. But definitely want to take a look at who moves in and out of the main teams that dominate Challenger, whether that be Feyenoord, like Geertruida is still there. He's been very good lately. Does he remain there? Does he remain a strong option? Branthwaite has been very good for PSV, but I believe they did not opt to buy him. They decided not to buy him, so he'll be going back to Everton and then likely out from there. But those are some defenders that I was looking at. So if we move over to midfield here, we have currently in America the best midfielder, and that's Almada. However, he scares the shit out of me. I don't own one because I just am like, man, I don't really know what I can do with this. Like, is he just going to – because, like, here's the thing with Almada for me. He has approximately so Chani just said I was actually wrong with Branthwaite. PSV did want to buy him, but Everton did not allow it. So maybe he'll go back to Everton. They will get more for him than they were originally going to get from PSV for him. So Almada to me is a guy that has zero good moves. He cannot get a good move, I don't think. Do you have a differing opinion on that with Almada?
But that was my girlfriend creeping in the background, guys. Don't think I'm just running girls in and out of this apartment. But yeah, no. Honestly, like the link that I saw with the Armada thing about 2 or 3 weeks ago was Napoli. And like initially, and I think I spoke to you about it as well, I thought, a player of his quality playing in the MLS, it can only get worse if we're being completely honest. Like you can't say it's going to get better.
I'm not going to say it can only get worse because I do think teams like PSV, Ajax, and Benfica types, like those are step, right? Like Enzo Fernandez went
Yeah, I agree. Fair enough.
Benfica. I do think that is a step they could take. But yeah, to your point, most of them are bad.
Yeah, and I just think with his exposure, I know he didn't really play in the World Cup and stuff, but the type of player he is, I don't see him making that Benfica move before making like the next big European move. I think he's going to go straight into that like top 5 league type of move, right? And that's why, the Napoli was discussed. I don't know how probable that is. People in the chat maybe, might be able to disprove that, but that was the sort of links I saw. I don't see that being like a terrible move, if I'm being honest. Like if he's allowed to play with like your Kvashvilas, and I know Oshima might be moving or maybe he doesn't, whatever. It's a very exciting team to score a lot of goals. Could he sort of not replace Zielinski, but kind of fill that sort of gap in that sort of number 8, floats into number 10 sometimes in a 3. I think that would be a nice move. Don't get me wrong. Is it as nice as playing in the number 10 role for Atlanta in the MLS? No. But midweek utilities, if you're playing in, in a strong Napoli team, they just won the league. I think that would be like a good move for him. I'm not in my head thinking I need to buy an Armada because he's going to move to Napoli. But I still think it's like a good enough move if you own one and don't want to, jump ship, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I won his super rare, and I was just sitting there and I'm just like, if he's going to give me this season, if I'm going to get the full season, I would keep him. But I'm just like, I do not think I get the full season of him. I think he leaves in the summer based on what I'm seeing.
I agree. I don't think he's going to wait around, to be honest.
Which is the only reason I haven't bought a rare. But then I'm sitting here like I literally this week I was sitting here and I'm just like, because I have good U23 summer pieces because again, U23 summer pieces are never like there are not that many outlier alpha type cards. Like it's not like, oh my God, these guys are going to go out there and rip what Veerman does. Like it's oh, these guys are solid for the most part, or like this guy's good. Yeah. I was sitting there, I'm like, should I buy an Almada? I literally this week, and I'm like, man, I don't want to go buy an Almada when he just could die. And I'm just like,
you might use him for 2 games, literally.
Like, yeah, I really just don't want that because it's not cheap. Like if I'm gonna go buy an Almada, I'm probably playing half an ETH, and I'm just like, man, for a rare, I'm just not super interested here. But like, so yeah, we see a lot of guys that are aging out here. Veerman's aging out, which is actually funny because if you remember back to last summer, I talked about it, I think, with Laird last week. Last summer on all these shows, every show that people did, it was like, who is the top U23 mid? Everyone said Veerman. And he honestly, I don't even think was that good. I think he was like good, but not that good. He's still pretty much the top U23 mid. And he is from the European season. He's the top U23 L40 mid with his 63 or so from an L40. And you see Veerman aging out. Your boy Spurtsian, he's not aging out. He still stays around, but we lose to Johnny Reinders. I thought that I think he's great. I really love Reinders. He's honestly he's probably one of my favorite players to watch. I really love watching Reinders. I watch almost every AZ game, and I really enjoy watching him. Trezor ages out, my boy. A lot of these guys are going to have risky moves. Bellingham, lots of links with him with Real Madrid. What's he going to do there? Is he going to slot into an everyday starter? I don't think so. I think they have too many mids for him to be like every game, but maybe he will be. Do you think that Jude would start every game at Real with what they have?
I wouldn't want to put a bet on it, but like I don't see why he couldn't in that sense. I know there's options there. The Cruces, Modric is still going to be alive. Camavinga wants to play midfield again. I don't think Tchouameni's, I'm not saying he's like out of the question, but from what I've seen recently and how he's performed, he's not really in the conversation for me in terms of like, even, I mean, he's been okay. He started off pretty well, but he's really, I don't know, just gone off the boil the last couple of months. Camavinga's been sort of that standout, even from left back. But yeah, I mean, I think Jude starts more than he don't. Like, I think he starts 95%. I don't think you bring in £100 million midfielder. It's his age. Like, he's 19. He can play every game if he really needs to, And I think you'll have a great sort of effect there on that team. Do I want to get involved in it? Without me knowing the situation, I don't know. Like I love him as a player. I don't think he's like, he is a good SO5 player, but like he's not somebody that's going to like just completely dominate Real Madrid games in that sense. Like he's going to get assists and goals because that's just the type of player he is. But is he going to get like 40, 50 AA games and stuff where you're just like blowing everything out of the wall? I don't know. I hope he does, but I just don't know in my brain if I can foresee that right now. Like you said, Tajani, some of the big boys are aging out of the mids. Trezor's been exceptional this season. I know you were a big fan of his, having the super for a long time and getting a lot of utility out of that. Veerman, there's some massive players leaving. Enzo comes into the question for me a bit, under Pochettino. I think next season we could foresee, like the games I'm watching Enzo recently, I had to tweet about a couple of days ago against United, but he honestly, like, he looks like so frustrated right now. And I know, big price tag, whatever, you're playing centre mid in a team that just doesn't want the ball. Like they don't want the ball as much as like he wants to give them the ball. Like he is literally the only player in that team is willing to get on that ball and try and make things happen. He's not the most athletic. He's not going to be running up and down that field like all game. He hasn't got the legs to do that. But ability-wise, he's far superior to anything that Chelsea is sort of showing me right now. And yeah, regardless, that's obviously a different question. Kochu, he's got off the boil a little bit, I think, in terms of his scores. His move away from, I think I saw yesterday, he basically said, if the right move comes about, I'm going type of thing. But it's not like a guarantee. What is the right move, though?
I don't know. I saw a link to Benfica, and I was like, man, if he goes to Benfica and plays like that Enzo role from early in the year and takes sets, whoo, boy, do I want that card. It's definitely a situation of what is he going to do in that situation. So we've had some other people mention some guys, so we will bring them up. First up, Jonathan, he wants to talk about Gluck, so let's talk about Gluck with him. I think Gluck could be really good. I think there's a lot more risk in him comparatively to some other guys. Here's the thing with Gluck, right? If I won Gluck, I wouldn't sell Gluck, but I'm also not going to go buy Gluck.
Yeah, I get that.
Pretty standard. What you're
it is, because there's a couple of situations where, like, any player at Salzburg is just prone to rotation, if we're just being completely honest, especially in that front six. So, you're adding Gluck in there. They brought him in this season or whatever, halfway through. He's had a few good games, and he looks an exceptional talent. Don't get me wrong. He's still very young, but don't forget, Lucas Susic has been injured for a while, and he'll be coming back at some point, who was their, quote unquote, number 10. There's going to be, some if they both stay, which I can't see how Susic would leave after being, injured and stuff. And obviously bring Gluck into the situation. I don't know if there's like a guaranteed spot for him where, like, some of these Germs mentioned in the chat, Arda Güler. I know you're a big fan, Sean.
Whoa, you gotta wait. We gotta get there.
All right, we'll wait. Okay. So yeah, I wouldn't buy Gluck right now. If I won one, I'd probably keep one. But I just think Salzburg, I don't like getting involved in Salzburg situations, if I'm being honest. They have some great talent, and there's some massive scorers coming out of those teams. Solé, Pavlovic on his day, whoever. But I don't like touching them because they just stink of DMP one week, hat trick the next week with a Sesko. I just don't know if I want to get myself involved in that. That's my only my only thing on the Salzburg situation.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's definitely concerning from a Salzburg perspective what they do, but like also here's a concern for me, right? Gluck has started for Salzburg now. He has started 8 games, which is obviously not a lot, and this sample size isn't massive, but it's enough that I'm going to at least look at it and think about it. And in that, he has averaged an AA of like 8, and he's had 2 decisives. So he's averaging like 49 points in those games. That's obviously not going to cut it. So he needs to take a massive step up from that level to get to a place of like wanting that card. So going from him to someone who has more so done that recently, and that is Baturina from Zagreb. So I'm not sure if there are rumors about him sticking around, but if you look at what Baturina's done recently, I mean, he's just absolutely popping off late in the season. Like his L15 is 68 for Zagreb, and he is only just turned 20. So you have years with it. So what's your thoughts on Baturina?
He's been exceptional. I'm quite disappointed that I didn't really get on board a bit sooner, to be honest, because he has been like, he's just the perfect age, perfect sort of goal and assist ratio. AA's there in an uber dominant team in Dynamo. I'm quite disappointed in myself that I didn't get involved in that. Chani says Baturina is prime for a move into the Bundesliga, in my opinion, and that kind of looks ideal. I mean, I wouldn't disprove that. I think that the numbers he's put up, I think he's the second. I think combined he has the second most in the Croatian league in terms of goals and assists. I thought I read that maybe on Twitter today. Yeah, I can't see how he doesn't get a move if somebody comes in with 15, 20 mil. It's a lot of money for Dynamo Zagreb. Can he emulate that in the Bundesliga? I'm not saying he won't. He very might be able, very well might be able to, but it's an easier league, in that Croatian league. But honestly, there's some good names here. I'm seeing Enzo Lafi still got another year. Does he get a favourable move? Xavi Simons has been exceptional, if we're being honest, for PSV. His AA game isn't incredible, but the goals and assists that he's been able to put up, he's come in clutch so many times again this weekend for PSV, and only 20, so many years left. Szoboszlai's been a little bit disappointing, I would say. Like when he plays, he does seem to smash, but again, rotational risks at Leipzig, I don't like getting involved in. Kvashvili, I mean, what a year, what a player. Couple of years left as well. That's the type of player that I'd like to get involved with. Again, the AA is not maybe there as much as like your Veermans used to be and stuff. It depends what you want, isn't it? Like, what are you looking for, Sean? Are you looking for a midfielder that's gonna, average your 25 AAs or 20 AAs and maybe not as much of a DA merchant, or are you looking for those guys who are just DA merchants, but they max out at like 10 AA?
At this point, I think you need a combo, right? Like you cannot just get someone that doesn't, because realistically, especially if you're looking at rares or limiteds, if you're not putting up in the 80 to 90s, you're falling behind what people are doing to really get up near the top end of the range. So like you can't just have someone that's super high relevant, reliant on the decisive aspects. Similarly, like you can't just have someone that goes out there and rips 25 AA, but it's going to get decisive like once every 3 months. Like that's not going to cut it for you either. So I think you need a good combination. Rico Man brought up Ugarte for Sporting. He's been really strong as the season ended. I think he is a great name. And then Chani mentions my boy Sven Mijnans for AZ Alkmaar, and I think he's a really good shout. He's going into his last season of U23 eligibility left, but he's really cheap. If you look at his price points, like really cheap. He took sets yesterday. He took like half sets yesterday over Jesper Karlsson. Good shot that Mijnans ends up with like all sets next year. And he's already shown the ability to sort of smash some high-end spots. But now we're going to go into my boy, and Germ mentions Arda Güler. I love him. I mean, obviously it took me months to get his super rare, but I got to a point, Harry, where so my old strategy was I didn't really buy sexy pieces per se. And now I sort of have wanted to buy a few more sexy pieces because like prices are down. And if they're down, like that's a good time to buy sexy pieces in case they pop off. But I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to buy this super rare. And then I ended up bidding him like out of the world. Like, so Basil had 2. And he's like, yeah, just go buy the one on auction because I don't want to sell. He's like, I'd sell at some absurd price. And then I just literally just started jamming it in against this guy because I wanted the card. And Basil's like, all right, this is honestly pathetic because that's way too high. But Basil's like, I pretty much would buy him up till 2.5, and then over 2.5, I would sell him. So like Basil kind of like pity sold him to me, but he like ripped like 100 after that. And Basil's like, I should have only sold him at like 15 ETH because he's just the GOAT. But Güler's just someone that if he comes out and he plays consistently, which it appears to me like he's going to get a run next year at Fenerbahce. They just re-signed him, I think. They changed, which basically just changes his buyout clause. But if you sit there and you look at what he has done for Fenerbahce in starts, and you're like, oh my God, this guy is ripping 67 a game with a huge AA and a huge decisive potential. The dude is only 18. He just turned 18. You get U23 eligibility from him for Harry's going to be like, Harry's going to be like retired by the time Arda Güler's out of U23 eligibility. But like talent wise, have you watched the highlight films with Güler?
Oh yeah, I've watched enough. Yeah, I've watched enough tapes to real. This kid is really special, like incredibly special. Like that sort of you know, when Turkey sort of broke through at like, say, 16, 17, and we were kind of like, okay, wow, this kid's got incredible technical ability. Like if he can sort of get a defensive side of his game in order and stuff, which he's still working on, then there's a legit like world-class player like brewing there. And what I've seen from Gula, he's got, you know, some kids are just born with wands of left foot, and he has an absolute wand of a left foot that can just do things with a football that not many people can do, you know?
They look like Harry trades in charity games, right? Or in
well, if I was left-footed, maybe. no.
But
I wish I was left-footed.
So we'll get moving quick. So Ugarte apparently is moving to PSG via.
Yeah, there's PSG, Chelsea, and then Liverpool rumours with Ugarte. Ugarte's in that Florentino Luis category, right? Caicedo category as well, where like they're not going to get decisive, but they're just going to, like, on their day they smash 30s to 50 AA, right? And that is, I know you like that type of card.
Well, sometimes. if you smash 30 AA and then you get your decisive once a month, if you get a decisive once a month, like you're putting up 100 when you get decisive, like that still plays
for sure. Well. It does.
But yeah, I'm gonna actually call myself out for a change.
Okay.
Adam Bishop brings up Kakare, and you and I have had a story with Kakare. Kakare used to be pathetic. He was like one of the worst cards in the platform. He was just a steaming pile that had no upside whatsoever. Like this entire range right here, just like useless card. He had one game over 80, and he would average like one game every 3 months above like 60. It was just a terrible card. However, he has taken sets, and he has transformed into a pretty usable card the second half of this season. Kakare has been really, really good. So I'm going to shout out to myself and call me out for saying how shit Kakare was. And he has definitely been a usable card. So what's your thoughts on Kakare, since obviously you're a big fan?
Yeah, I was a big fan. I had his super, and yeah, obviously traded him away when I thought, like, you know, I think we had a conversation, and I'm not saying it was your reasoning why I got rid of my Kakare, but I just, at the time, I didn't like you just said, we didn't foresee this sort of peakness in his scores coming to fruition. I didn't really ever foresee him getting sets, and yeah, that's obviously, you know, had an amazing impact on his scores. So yeah, but then is Kakare prime for a move? Potentially, like, you know, the way I've watched a lot of Lyon this season since, you know, re-owning a Turkey, and I don't know, I think the way the commentators always speak about, like, they're just like, he's just primed to leave, like he's the perfect number 8 and all this stuff with Kakare. And I don't know, I think a lot of, you know, big sort of European clubs will be sniffing around him, and yeah, does he die? Maybe. Does he go back to those sort of, you know, one dark green score in a year type of thing because he doesn't get sets wherever he goes? Potentially. Do you get what I'm saying? Because he has a lot of what's the word, like loyalty and things, you know. At Lyon, he's gone through the academy there. He's been captain of every age group since he was like 3. Like, there's a lot of that there where, like, if he moves, you know, that sort of relationship isn't there. He has to rebuild that. And, you know, I just don't know if he just walks in and go somewhere else and hit those like really peak scores that he's been doing over the last 3 or 4
Yeah, because like I have to make it clear, this player in this part of the graph, that's not a good enough card.
No, it's not. I agree.
However, this player is most definitely a card that you want. So definitely a question of, it's very clear to me based on what we've seen with Kakare this year is that he needs sets. Absolutely needs them, or he's just incredibly mediocre. And is him staying on stats forever going to be a thing that's valid? I don't know. A couple people mentioned some MLS guys. Mark Lele mentioned him, and Kevin Hurd mentioned Noel Buck and Aiden Morris. Look, I think Noel Buck looks really good, and I think Aiden Morris has been really good. I just don't think these are guys that you're looking at and you're like, these guys are like super duper huge crushers. And they're like Noel Buck's going to take a leave. He's going to probably go. I think he's going to stay this season for New England because he's integrated himself into like a established role with New England. So I think he probably stays this year and then gets a transfer. But I don't know. Like, they just don't cut it to me or scream high end guys. So moving on to the forward position here. We are going to talk about, I'm sure, Cherokee, Dokus of the world. But the biggest discussion to start, at least, is going to be one that we've talked about frequently on our show, and that is Erling Haaland and how good he can be. And my concern for Haaland is that he just doesn't have as high of an upside as some other guys due to his lack of AA game. However, as you guys are going to see here, we're losing Mbappe, we're losing Osimhen, we're losing Jota, we're losing Jesper Karlsson. Like, we are losing some high-end guys. And it's a situation where I think Haaland is a great card to have going into next year. However, I also am a bit hesitant with him and think that there's definitely some concern with how high of an upside he is. But like, what do you think the realistic long-term what do you think a long-term realistic thought is with Haaland? And that, for me, like, I think he can just become Lewandowski. Like, that's like what he can be. And I'm not saying that is a bad card, because it's not, but this isn't a guy you're probably going to throw out there to like expect to get 90s and 100s out of. This is a guy you're expecting to put out there, and he's like definitely going to get you 60 because he just is going to score a goal. Is that kind of what you think he is, or do you think he has the ability to somehow gain an AA game of some sorts to upgrade himself?
I don't know. If I had, like, gun to my head, I don't think there's like an extended AA game in Haaland's game, if I'm being honest. I think we would have seen it already at Man City in his first season, personally. That's not to say he's not a great card to have, right? The only issue for me is where, like, if we compare him to like how you would play an Mbappé card over the last couple of years, Mbappé would be a captain. Like, how many times have you played Mbappé, Sean, and not captained him, if we're being honest? Maybe
I
none.
just got it. I
Once.
got the Mbappe in like the middle of the season, but like almost every time when they play, I captain them.
Exactly, right? So for me, I think I look at Haaland, say if you replaced your Mbappe with a Haaland because you know Mbappe's aging out, I don't think you as a good SO5 player, I don't think you're captain in Haaland many times, if I'm being honest. Unless there's like an elite crazy matchup where you think he's just going to score a hat-trick. I know he basically scores every game, but like you said, that's 60. Any decent midfielder can put up 25 AA quite comfortably. It's you want that Gula, you want that sort of midfielder or even forward next season that's going to put up 80 plus. They're your captain. And I don't know if Haaland, I'm not saying he doesn't have a place in elite teams next year or elite lineups, but I don't know if he's like the captain, if that makes sense. And I don't think that's a bad thing, but I'm just saying, if you're going to play him, you need somebody in either the extra position or that midfielder position, or both, that are like 100 capable. I'm not saying Haaland's like 100 capable, but he's definitely like not as Mbappe 100 capable as Mbappe is, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things, right? Like I've talked about it a lot. We've had a lot of shows where we talk about it, and like it feels like I'm like bashing him and saying he's a shit card, and I'm not. I'm not. He's a fantastic card. He's a wonderful card. He's a great player. Like, he's one of the best players in the world. It's just from an SO5 perspective. Like, if you look at him and you look at his L40, okay, he started 32 games in his L40. He has 35 decisives. Is he going to get, like, for him to really get up to, like, let's say 65 average player, he needs to average like 1.3, 1.4 decisive. No, he needs to average higher. He needs to average like 1.5 decisives a game, I think, or even higher to get to that type of player. And it's just a very, very difficult situation for him to get to. But again, like, you look at the guy and you see him, and the guy's going to put up a bunch of 60 and 70s, which isn't terrible. It's just one of those things where, like, if I look through his L40 and his 32 starts, he has 4 games over 80, 4 games 80 or above. So once a month, he's cracking 80, which is just kind of weird when you talk about him. You're like, this guy's going to score more goals than anyone in the world. And you're like, he's going to struggle to score Sorare points comparatively to other people. But I think, obviously, like, for me, him, Vinny Jr., like, those are like the class guys that you want. And those are the guys that you're really looking at. I think there's some new guys that are going to come in that are going to be really strong. Like, I think Jesper Karlsson leaves, and I think Myron van Brederode is probably going to start for AZ. Unfortunately, I haven't got him yet. I've tried to get him a couple times. It just hasn't really happened. But I think he could be solid. He's looked okay so far for them, but he's really young. So I think that he could be someone that comes in the future. Doku. So Doku is someone I want to talk about. So I have not been the biggest Jeremy Doku fan, and I just haven't been as high on the hype train as a lot of other people. And the reason for that is, if you look at like his long-term play, I saw a lot of games where I just didn't see upside potential, right? Like, I mean, not Kakare level, like you still saw upside from him back in the day, but like you look at him and I was like, I don't really see tons of AA game to go in line with what his decisive game was. I'm like, I really need to see something more about him. And Adam brings up a good question. Do I see Doku getting reduced minutes with Terrier returning? I don't really. I see the Doku as like they want him to be as good as possible so they can get as much money from him as possible. I don't really see him not starting unless it's an injury, which to be fair, again, it's Doku and injuries are like what he's known for. But anyway, so I started seeing his upside again in the recent 15 games. And like I was interested again, not here. I was interested like here. When I saw him rip off 3 straight 80s, I was like, all right, like, and these 3 straight 80s were in games where you're talking about Shakhtar, you're talking about Shakhtar again, then you're talking about Nantes. Like, but he's putting up great AAs with these, and he's putting up the decisives with them, or he's putting up great AAs. So like you look through his recent games, there's a good combination of AA and decisive actions, which is obviously what we're looking. So what's your thoughts on Doku, and have you always been on the hype train?
Yeah, I mean, I've always rated him. Came through really young at Anderlecht. Obviously, got a move, and yeah, injuries have hindered his progress in terms of SO5 scores and just in real life. And I bet that's been really frustrating for him. But yeah, I mean, the type of player he is, like he's like for me in terms of how he plays and kind of the scores he gets. In a weird way, are kind of better peak-wise, but like he's basically Vinny Jr., if we're being honest, in terms of like the type of forward. He's not number 9, obviously, right? He's an explosive winger that's going to take on their men, win their ground duels or whatever, and then, deliver a ball into the box, and they're going to get the assist from there. Obviously, he can score goals as well, but he's going to be predominantly known for his assisting. And I don't know, yeah, he's shown some incredible 20 to 30 AA games with that, with the decisive to get into that, the golden 100 and stuff, and 90 to 100. It's been great to see because we've always known how good he is. It's just, can he get a stretch of games together to sort of show us how good he can be over a consistent period of time? Can we see an injury? Gun to my head, does Doku like not miss a game next season? I know like everyone misses a game, but like, is he going to get a serious injury next season? I obviously hope not. When I mean serious, I mean like a couple months or whatever. I really hope not. I hope he's, the injuries are sort of, left behind. But a type of player like he is, the explosiveness, the fast twitch fibers, love to be pulled with the hamstrings and stuff. That's just the type of player he is. It's weird why like Mbappé and Vinny are like immune to that, because they're in that same sort of category in terms of, fast dribblers, or just fast players in general. They don't seem to struggle with injuries. It's just genetic. Sometimes you just get dealt a bad hand. I hope that doesn't follow Doku, but was it like history shows he does enjoy an injury. Yeah. So I just hope, what I'm saying, there's risk there.
Like you just said too, a lot of the times it's genetic. A lot of the times it's just too, you're growing, right? Like you just turned 20, he's still growing. And sometimes like I've seen with players, and not just soccer, but a lot of other sports, sometimes the guys can be injured consistently while they're growing, and then all of a sudden they're done growing and their body gets more used to it. They get onto a more like refined training regimen, and then all of a sudden, boom, the guy is ready to go. And Kevin brings up a good comparison, I think. So he said that Doku reminds him of Ousmane Dembele. Ousmane Dembele, as a player, when he plays and is healthy, is incredibly good.
Yeah.
So I think that makes a lot of sense as well. And then, so another guy that I think is high end is Cherki. I think that Cherki likely stays at Lyon for a year, and they give him like the keys and are like, here you go, Cherki. You're the guy, like you get the job done. And circling back to Doku, Mark Lele just asked if Doku gets a move, is it RIP for Doku or is it good? I don't think it's likely RIP for Doku if he gets a move, because if he gets a move, it's going to be upwards. It's just going to be a question of whether he starts all the time. Because so much of this is like, you got to be playing every week. If you're not, you're kind of a useless card anyways. If I don't know if you're going to play, you're useless to me. Like if I see a guy that DNPs like once every 3 games, he doesn't start. you're dead to me. And Sorare actually brings up someone that I just don't think is going to be very good. I wouldn't want his card at all right now, and that's Gift Orban. Don't get me wrong. Gift Orban has been fantastic for Ghent as the season has gone on. But, man, I don't think he can sustain that, and I think he's going to take a move that's going to be not great and likely is not going to be great. But so, like, something I'm trying to do more of right now is, right, getting the guys that are incredibly high end. And I'm talking guys that I think can realistically average like 65 plus points. So we're talking like top 20 to 30 players on the platform. And it's just like if it happens and all of a sudden they're a top 40 or 50 player on the platform, you can't reasonably afford them, right? Because they are just going to be so expensive. So for me, it's a situation of like, can this guy become a 65 to 70 average player? And I'm trying to acquire more guys like that. So, like, for example, right now, Doku has been a top 20, a top 30 or so player on the platform in the last 15 games. However, his price point has doubled from where it was a month ago. He went from like 0.13 for rare to like 0.28. So he's like doubled for his price. If Doku starts off next season and he rips off like a L5 of like 75 or 80 to start the season and just smacking, he's going to be an incredibly expensive card and one that's just really hard to go get. Like, so I paid like 1.5 ETH for his super rare last week. And if he becomes that top 20 card, we're not even talking U23, like he becomes like, let's say he averages 68 points as an L15, but like one where he's played every game and you're like, yeah, this looks good and this guy's not injured and there's no question about him. You can't really get that card. That's just like not a card you can go buy easily, right, Harry?
Yeah, no, it's tough. It's tough to like. I know you're not stupid for doing what you've done and what I've sort of been watching you do. Get those sort of high end or super high end class, or not classy, but like hypey sort of under 23s in for next season. To where if they do just, if one of Gula, Cherky, Doku, or even all three, but like if one of those three like explode, there's like a 5 ETH card there basically in terms of a super version, right? Which becomes super tough for 99.99% of Sorare users to acquire. But like the fact that you're sort of hedging your bets and you're buying 3 of them. Let's just say 2 explode and 1 just doesn't for whatever reason, maybe a cheeky injury, whatever it is. Like you've done well there, haven't you? Yeah. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, if you find one of those guys and you can plug them in week out and you can like play them and just like boom, like this guy's like that card's worth so much, especially if you can do it for years.
There's some decent like not under the radar, but like cheaper options that I'll like kind of just breathe through. I think Dwight McNeil's been great. He's been putting up some crazy scores for the team he plays for, and they've obviously survived, which is, I mean, technically not a great thing for SO5 in terms of Everton, but he's shown that he can score really, really well AA wise as well in the Premier League. I only think he goes from strength to strength. João Pedro's just moved to Brighton from Watford. Okay, a player from the Champ going to the Prem on paper isn't a good thing, but I do think he has the capabilities to be like an exceptional player with McAllister potentially, definitely moving, I think, from Brighton. He could take over sets at Brighton and be an absolute menace, but don't quote me on that. Barcola, somebody mentioned him in the chat. I think he could be exceptional next season. In the limited starts he's had for Lyon, I think he's had like 10 or 12 starts. His goals and assists have been like really high. And when you watch him play, he's another one of those wingers who's quite explosive, but he's more lanky and taller and more rangy. But the way he can drift past players is exceptional, and he had that sort of finishing touch of those decisives as well. I'm not saying he's Doku level, but there's definitely a player in there. Jonathan David, still only 23, another year left. Yeah, he probably moved somewhere, but the guy's just a goal scorer. I know someone said Gift Orban might be moving to Leo. That could be the replacement there. But just going down the list, I mean, it gets a bit not sketchy, but like Sesko moving. I think he's already agreed to Leipzig, so that's a thing, I believe. Does he smash there potentially? Martinelli, I know you're not a big fan, but one player I'm gonna tell you now who I think is going to be again I don't know if he's going to be okay. I'm going to say he's going to be a top 10 under 23 forward next season, and it's not going to be that much of a surprise. Is Rodrigo?
Yeah, I actually really like that call. I think that's a really good call. I think Rodrigo.
I think I think he could be he is elite on his day as well now, but I think next season, full season, him and Vinny, that stack could be really naughty, extremely
think
naughty.
Rodrigo's shown enough that you can feel pretty confident he's going to be in the lineup at all times going forward, and I think that's a really good shout. Bakayoko, I think if he gets an extended run for PSV, he's someone that could be there. Someone mentioned a little bit ago, I'm not going to go back up and quote it, but he brings up Federo. I think that he makes sense. I think Musiala honestly has been flying under the radar a little bit right now.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I think Musiala is someone that's under the radar, but Musiala, when people are talking about guys, you almost never hear Musiala's names.
You don't, because he's not a forward. That's the reason I think. I know he has midfielder cards.
Yeah, but his cards are
forward, at
least a chunk of them. I don't know if all of them are.
Vert as well, we could mention.
So
as a forward.
There was a question, or so Mark Lele asked a good question as well. So he's like, at what point do you think it's safe to buy a breakout star like Gift Orban? Do they need to be starting 10 games in a row before you pull the trigger on a purchase, or is it higher, lower? For me, it's more about a player. I want to see what type of AA they can put up with their goal scoring or just. Oh, I was talking. Harry didn't tell me I was muted.
Sorry, yeah.
My bad, guys. Sorry about that. Yep, no, it was me. I was muted. So for me, it's a situation where it's Haber, unfortunately, said that Sean can do that much better. I don't know, Haber. I think that some people probably enjoy my voice. It's very angelic out there, you know. But it's a situation where you have a lot of people that you have to consider where they're at in the price point for whether or not they can be sustainable there, right? Like if you look at Gift Orban, you're like, Gift Orban's averaging 75 a game. I'm like, that sure as shit isn't sustainable. What's a realistic sustainable range? Then I want to ask and be like, all right, what's a realistic long-term path for Gift Orban? Do I see this guy as a guy that's going to take a step to, like we talked about earlier with MLS guys, is an MLS guy going to take a step to Ajax and then another step upwards? Or are they going to go from Ghent to Real Madrid, or is he going to go from Ghent to I don't know, mid-table Augsburg or something? Those are the type of things you're going to do, because if you're sitting there and you look at Gift Orban and you're like, Gift Orban, I saw Mark Lele said earlier with Gift Orban, are you going to go to Lille? If I'm sitting there, I'm like, Gift Orban's upside is going to Lille. I'm like, all right, realistically, Gift Orban is not a long-term card that I'm excited about. It's a short-term play that I need to pay off quickly. Because if I'm sitting there, I'm looking at Gift Orban at Lille, I'm not sitting there like, yep, 90-point score at Lille. This guy's amazing. Whereas you look at the guys we were previously talking about with Cherokee, Doku, Gerler, those type of guys. Gerler is Arda Gerler. Is this guy going to end up at Real Madrid, or is Cherokee going to end up at PSG? You're literally talking of are these guys the highest end guys out there? So what's your thoughts in terms of buying an under the radar / guy that's popping off a little bit?
I mean, yeah, the whole what Mark said then, what's the sort of the sweet spot? Is it 10 games, 5, whatever it is? I'd like to. I think 10 might be too much. That's a third of a season for me. I think at that point the price is not going to change per se in that sense. If he's popped off for those 10 games, you're paying crazy amount for that, whoever that guy is, right? I think you could tell. Well, it depends. It depends who you are in that sense. But I think you could tell within 5 games, personally, maybe even less. If Gift Orban moves to Lille and he has 5 games, I think that would be a decent enough sample size ish to be okay, this guy isn't going to score goals, or this guy is going to have a really good, a Jonathan David season last year or whatever, top goal scorer in Lille. That is possible with a Gift Orban. A good little scenario, I guess, example-wise, like Ricardo Pepi, obviously moved from the MLS, went to Augsburg, completely sucked. Like, it was just too much of a jump for him at that age.
When you're a goal-dependent striker and you're like, I'm going to go to the last place team in the league, you're just like asking for it.
He's done well at Groningen. Groningen got relegated from the Eredivisie and he's smashed, if we're being honest. Okay, different league. It's easier than the Bundesliga on paper. You know, and then now I saw somebody mentioned it, you know, now he's primed for maybe that PSV Feyenoord move, which I think that'd be like in my head, I think that'd be a good spot for a Pepe. He knows the league. He's already played in the Eredivisie for half a season or whatever it's been, scored well there. Why couldn't he score even better on a better team? That just makes a lot of sense to me. But I think max 5 games you would need to really suss out a player's sort of trajectory for that season. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be outliers, but I think 5 games is enough, I think, if you're watching the games as well.
This is kind of this is a personal thing too, but like you can suss out also a lot more about a player if you watch the games than if you look at stuff. Like if I watch a game, I can have a lot more of a idea, because like you may not be able to tell like what type of player it is just by looking at the stats immediately. If you watch 2 or 3 games of a player, you can have a pretty good understanding of like, this guy is a goal dependent forward that's going to need to rip 60 goals a season to be good. Or you can be like, this guy is a winger that's just not going to have very many decisives in his game, and therefore would need to have an absolutely stupid AA to really be relevant. Or you can look at a guy and be like, this guy AA is pretty strong, and he ends up in a lot of really good positions that are going to lead to decisives. I like that type of player. So watching a game can expedite your process if you know what you're sort of looking for with stuff. Jace mentions Abada and that he should leave. Yeah, I think Abada's leaving. I don't know exactly where he's going to go yet. Mark Lele brings up Wirtz and Musiala. Again, 2 guys that are definitely expensive and definitely like high-end guys, but I definitely agree. I like both of them. And someone else that I'm going to mention here is Gustav Isaacson. Someone just mentioned Isaacson from Midtjylland, and they asked where we'd rate them when they're no longer in the playoffs. Very good question. I think that he's definitely looked really good. Even in the playoffs, he's been really strong for them, but they're in the bottom 4 playoff, or in the bottom side of the playoff. And if you remove like the bottom part of the playoff bracket, he wasn't that great during the whole season, but he's okay. So I would definitely be interested in owning a card. I don't know if I'm necessarily going out to buy it today, but definitely solid as well. So anyways, that is all for us. I think we went over each position pretty well today. I don't want to drag you guys on much longer. We're almost at an hour and a half as it is. So, Harry, is there anything else that you want to add here before we wrap it up?
Not really. I mean, just one little thing on forwards. I mean, you know, they're categorized as forwards on their Sorare card, but you've got wingers, you've got 10s playing forward, and you've got 9s playing forward. Like, that's where the differences in AA are going to become, you know, where like a Doku's going to rake up crazy AA as well as like a Cherky will, because they're playing deeper. Like, they're involved in, you know, they're involved lower down the sort of down the pitch than like a number 9 would be, like a Haaland, right? That's kind of the layman's terms reasons of why the AA is the way it is, type of thing. So always think about that as well when you're looking at forwards. They're not all number 9s. I know that's probably a stupid thing to say, but some people might just think that they're a forward. But like ultimately, some of these forward cards aren't playing up front, or most of them aren't, especially the good scorers, you know. So that's something to, I think, maybe might get overlooked if you're like a new sort of Sorare player. But yeah, that's kind of it. I think we've touched upon as much as we can, I guess, in an hour and a half. There's loads of other players that we could have spoken about, but like you said, we'd have been here for 3 hours.
Yeah, like, I mean, you and I could be sitting here talking for like hours. Like, we could sit there and talk about, I mean, I'll just give a name. I talked about Van Breda earlier, but like Lado from Alkmaar, he could end up starting on the right wing next year. He looked pretty good. Brian just brings up Alexander Isaac. I talked about it again. I don't think Isaac's good enough. Personally, I think that he's one of those cards that's just not good enough to realistically play. Actually, it's pretty funny because I think since we talked to him, he's averaging like 45 a game. So I just think that that's a guy that's just not good enough regardless. But yeah, we could talk about this for hours. Like, there's lots of other guys we could talk about, U23 pieces as well. Like, I mean, we could go on and on. We could be here for 5 hours. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Hopefully that you guys we're able to pick some things up. We tried to talk about some people that are like maybe a little less known, but we did talk about a lot of guys that are are higher end people that are of interest as well. So that's going to wrap it up for us. Make sure you guys like and subscribe if you have not already done so. And please make sure you leave a comment and say how much you enjoyed me and Harry doing the show as well, so that Larry can see that and just feel the love for Harry and myself. So anyways, for Harry, I am Sean. We will see you guys later. Have a good weekend. I guess not
guys.
weekend. Have a good week.
Boom. Boom. Boom.